another episode of Diablo. So today I wanted to give you my first impressions about the Necromancer class as we end the open beta for Diablo 4 and we go for the long wait for the game to be released. So I hope this is going to record properly and well, but we'll see how this goes. Bear with me because I am playing on a 5120 by 1440 monitor. This is the Samsung G9. I am playing with a 4090, but unfortunately posting 5120 by 1440 videos is a very difficult thing to do. So let's see how this works out. So I'm going to be playing with the screen a little bit here on my OBS setup. So essentially what I want to do is walk you guys through the different builds for the character for the Necromancer. So let's see how that's going to look like here. So first up, I'm going to take you through the Book of the Dead, which is his first skills. Let's pull this over here, kind of give you the screen for that one. All right, so if we were to look at Book of the Dead, you basically get a number of skills inside here, which are the Skeletal Warriors, your Skeletal Mages, and then your Golem. So interesting character here. We have to go to, excuse me, let's go inside here and let's pull up our skill assignments because our Golem's not there. So there we go. So now let's take a look back at Book of the Dead. So your Golem you don't get till level 25, and unfortunately that's where we're locked in terms of abilities. So we don't see anything for 28 and 32 in terms of what we have there. But you do have your Golem. It's a bone Golem. You do have a blood Golem. So I'm interested to see how the blood Golem works in, because I am more interested in your vampire Necromancer build than I am your bone Necromancer build. So we'll have to see how that looks. But you get two options here. Each time your bone Golem takes up to 20% of his maximum life is damaged, it sheds a corpse. Or you can go your bone Golem gains 10% maximum life, and the amount of thorns they inherit from you is increased from 30 to 50%. I think with the bone Golem that's going to be the way to go, but we'll see. Now outside of this, you get your Skeletal Mages, and you have three brands of them. You have your Shadow Mages, your Cold Mages, and then your Bone Mages. So now the most popular build to be playing currently for the game is Bone for the Necromancer. It just is what it is, right? So Bone is the way to go. Now I don't particularly necessarily feel that way, but we'll have to see how that band plays out when the game gets fully released. Bone is definitely strong inside of the current build. I want to make sure I can go out in town so that I can summon some of these mages. So of these abilities, you basically have the reduced life of cost of your bone mages is reduced. It was definitely a lot better than each time a bone mage dies from its own attack, they leave behind a corpse and fortify you for 11% of your base. Now here goes where this bone and blood build might work out best, is that if you went for the blood build, this is probably going to be more helpful for you there. Now you have the Cold Mages, and these guys basically restore your essence for you and basically freeze your enemies and slow them. Then you have your Shadow Mages. There's the shadow class abilities and skills, so you can use those as well, which basically does damage to stun. And I didn't really quite get the Shadow Bolt every 6th attack. I didn't quite understand that one as well. Then you have what is your Skeletal Warriors. Basically the Reaper tree was sitting there for you to use. You have your Defenders, your Skirmishers, and then your Reapers. Your Reapers are like your heavy attack kind of class characters. You know, you basically have the ability to, they do more powerful attacks to slow, stun, or vulnerable targets. This one's not so bad because if you're playing the bone build, you will have these characters essentially vulnerable the entire time, or you have the 15% chance to carve the flesh off enemies, forming a corpse. I didn't really think that that was beneficial. So let's go here. Defenders, you do make your characters, you're basically, your skirmishers become more tank-like, right? And then you have your normal skirmishers. They basically become a more defending type characters, I guess is the best way to look at them there. Unfortunately, no way to actually play this out and actually look at your map, because you can't just overlay the map for some odd reason. Like every isometric game and its mother basically has the ability to do that. So I want to be able to show you your different summons basically through the game. So let's see if we can't do that, right? So my Golem automatically summons when I go out of town. Looks a bit bad. He has his roar technique as well. Like Really cool. Now, your character is basically at the whim of everything and anything while you're initially starting up, because you can see you're not necessarily a character that's doing every bit of damage to him. So you got to get some characters killed so that way you can raise the dead. So you're basically going to summon 3, 4, or 5 of the your skirmishers, and then as soon as you complete that, you can then start looking at like getting your mages up. So summon, and then summon. Like that's essentially it inside here. Now I'm going to talk to you about my preferred playstyle inside the game. Mostly this comes from the place of how do you like to play the game versus what you could do in the game. And let me explain what I mean by that. So essentially, your abilities for your characters are going to pare down to 2 different abilities that are going to be really viable at this point. Is basically blood, which is like the vampire necromancer, and then your bone splitters. The bone splitters seem to be the route of choice right now, because it definitely seems to be the DPS route of choice. That's essentially what you're looking at. But I preferred the blood damage. So between the 2, you can basically go whichever one you want. In there, I didn't really quite find Decompose and Reap, which are the shadow class abilities, to basically be all that fun to play. It just wasn't my style. So essentially you go Hemorrhage and Enhance Hemorrhage and then Initiates Hemorrhage, and you're basically doing the same thing with your Bone Spears. It's not that nothing's wrong with Acolyte's Hemorrhage or Acolyte's Bone Splinters. It's just that these kind of seem to basically sustain the vulnerability and basically sustain the fortify that you're getting. So you can see what we're dealing with. Basically, this is damage and this is defense. So if you're a player that needs to stay alive and you're more concerned with that, go inside blood. And if you're the player that wants to deal more DPS, go inside bones, and you'll get that. Now, when you come down the tree from here, you essentially end up with 2 abilities that are pretty good, right? At least in my opinion. Like Bone Spear, you can go into that if you're going strictly bone build. Nothing wrong with it. It just seems like the uptime that you basically have from Bone Splitters doesn't really seem like you need to go into Bone Spear. Now, if you go into Blood, you basically have 2 abilities. You have Blood Lance and you have Blood Surge. Blood Lance is pretty much the exact same thing as Bone Spear. However, you do have Blood Surge, and this is where the playstyle between the 2 different classes sort of starts to deviate. If you're playing the Blood class and you go with Blood Surge, you can basically do the Vampire Necro, and you can do it from the rear by going into Blood Lance, or you could do it and get engaged in the fight with your minions and go Blood Surge. And what I mean by that, and I'll show you this right now, is the playstyle becomes a little bit different, right? Like I'm basically going to find enemies to attack, and when I find them, I'm going to cast this spell, and then I'm going to go Blood Surge. I'm basically in the heart of that. I can't do Blood Surge from back here because I'm not hitting anything. So that's what I mean. Like, do you want to play in the heat of things, or do you want to play pulled back? That's essentially is going to be the determination about whether or not you go Blood Surge or you go Bone Spear, Blood Lance. For me, I kind of like this ability better. Basically, you're pulling in health benefits from the character. So you can see here exactly what I mean. Like Blood Surge, basically you're drawing blood from enemies, and you're basically draining from them. So it's like basically think about like you're getting heals from them. You're vampiring, vampiric touch is basically what it is, right? Now you could go Blood Lance, and Blood Lance will just basically throw a lance at them, and that will deal damage to them as well. It's not bad. It's the same thing as Bone Spear, so it's not a bad skill. Now, when we get down here, however, to the next ability tree, I didn't quite like any of these in terms of Corpse Explosion, Blood Mist, nor did I like Bone Prison. Bone Prison is like the thing you see most of the characters do, where they form like a wall of bones around a target and keep them within that area. Wasn't really my thing. And then you had Blood Mist. This is a good like get out of jail free iframe. Basically, you basically turn into a mist of blood, and you're immune for 3 seconds to any damage, and you're basically doing like small ticks of damage to the other characters, which is healing you a little bit. So it's like a get out of jail free card, like escape. The thing is, I didn't find myself using it very often, so it just was one of those things that became backseat. I played around with it for a while to see if it was going to make sense, but it just never kind of fell into fell into frame for me. Next up, you want to basically make sure you imbuing those skeletal warriors with something. So go inside skeletal warrior mastery here. Up next, I think bread and butter to the class is going to be, everybody is going to probably be choosing Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is a curse class skill, and you basically have enhanced Iron Maiden, and then you have abhorrent Iron Maiden, or you have Horde Iron Maiden. If you're going strictly DPS, Horde Iron Maiden it is. If you're going survivability, then Abhorrent Iron Maiden it is. Essentially, you're going to be opening up with this attack, whether you're playing DPS or not. It's really simple, and then you basically do whichever damage it is that you're going to be doing from there, whether you're staying from behind or front. It's got a really low cooldown cost on it, cooldown time on it, and low essence cost as well. So it's a really, really good skill. I think that this is going to be one of the skills that I don't care what you're playing. If you're playing Necromancer, this is going to be part of your kit. Decrepify isn't bad. It's just, it's a status ailment kind of skill and a DOT that just doesn't really feel like, when I played around with it, I don't know, I just didn't feel like there was really much happening with this. So yeah, it wasn't my thing. Now you do have Skeletal Mage Mastery and Amplified Damage, which is going to help out that Iron Maiden, and the Skeletal Mage Mastery, which is going to help out those mages in the background now. Now the big thing about this one was I found it really weird because like it's the curse target, so you're basically at 9% more damage on your Iron Maiden, and it's like a big investment of skill points for just 25 levels of what we got to play with, but so I couldn't really tell how much it was doing in terms of like killing, because it isn't a DOT overtime effect anyway. So I was like, I don't know. We'll have to see. Now, getting down to your next skill tree, you're basically going to be deciding whether you go bone or whether you go blood. If you go bone and blood, or bone or blood, you're basically going to be determining which one of these trees you go. If you go blood, you're definitely going to go to the top of the tree with gruesome mending, transfusion, tides of blood, drain vitality, and even conceivably colorless blood. I think the drain vitality is the only one that I was like, yeah, I can get that 2% of my base life, 25% chance to fortify you for 2% of your base life. 2%, not a whole lot. It does go up, but the fortify effect does matter a lot when you're playing blood. Basically, think about the fortify as just damage reduction for you. That damage reduction does come into play when the damage reduction and your life skills come into play of your damage calculator, though. So be aware of that. If you go bone, then you're going serration, compound fracture, evulsion, and I don't think that the rapid ossification was worth it. But the other thing that you had down here was corpse tendrils. It was another skill that I just didn't really feel like it did anything, to be honest. Like basically you have corpse bodies on the floor, and you basically summon tendrils out of them that would do damage. But because most of the characters are moving around so much, you pretty much get characters out of range for it. So I don't know, it just didn't work for me. The Bone Spirit was another skill that I was like, I didn't really quite feel it. Like, I don't know. Like, it could be one of those skills that, like, could make an impact, but I feel like for the cost, it was just too much. So I didn't go with it at all. But so, like, my investor basically went back into Skeletal Mage Mastery and Amplified Damage. Now, down the tree right here, I think everybody is going to basically choose this skill. It's going to be Army of the Dead. It was probably the better ultimate skill out of the three. So you have Blood Wave, which basically summons a tidal wave of blood, and it's, can be beefed up so that way, it slows enemies, and you basically collect 3 blood orbs as it travels. Or you could go with Bone Storm, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. It's a tornado of bones, right? And you can go there, and it's like damage reduction is increased while this is active, and then my critical strike chance is also increased while it's active. However, I just think that the Army of the Dead is going to be the one that, it hits the hardest. It does have the longest cooldown time, however, so be aware of that. Now, you can go for Prime Army of the Dead, which is going to basically make your volatile skeletons explode, and you have the ability to go Supreme Army of the Dead, which raises your skeletal warriors and your mages as well. Don't forget, down here inside this tree, we do have Golem Mastery, and then you have 2 other skills that I think are really cool. One, you have Inspiring Leader, which is basically after you have been healthy, your minions gain attack speed. Probably not so much. Like, it'd be cool to see how this how this is going to basically play out, but I really liked Hellbent Commander. I didn't have enough points in order to play around with this because we're limited to 25, but you can see here your minions deal 10% increased damage while you're close to them. If you're playing the blood build with that blood surge, like I said, this is going to be coming really handy for you. And then you can see Bonded Essence. Every 5 seconds, your Skeletal Priest healing will heal your skeletons for 20% of their maximum life. And then you have over here the Death's Defense. Your minions cannot lose more than 75% in their maximum life from a single damage instance. So like this is a really cool tree inside here because you're basically playing with your minions. Like you're still getting the survivability of your minions and you're basically playing along with them. It's going to be dependent on you. Now you do have the 2 skills over here, Memento Mori and Standalone. These are basically like if you were playing, you know, solo and you didn't really care about these minions, basically use them as kamikazes and things like that, which you can do, and you can just basically use those. Now, we didn't get a real chance to play with any of these because we're limited to 25 points, so I'm interested to see how these passives work. The key passives inside here, but you have Ossified Essence. Obviously, if you're playing Bone, you have Kaylin's Edict, which is inside here. They get, I think anybody can go with these. It's just your minions are getting a bonus. Then you have the Shadow Blight over here as well. I'm gonna have to play with Shadow more when I was just too interested in Bone and Blood to kind of play around and mixtures of the two. So you can increase your maximum life by 10% after being healthy for 15 seconds. Your next blood skill overpowers. So it's basically bonus damage. You can see down here on the bottom what I was talking about is basically you get your overpower, gives you your current life and your fortified life, basically counts towards that bonus damage. I preferred, that was me, I preferred using the blood build more than I did the bone build, just because I like the engagement of actually being in the fight than I did like standing behind. But like I said, you're not limited in any way by just, you know, if you still want to be the character that's kind of in the back while your minions do all the damage, you can still do that. You just need to choose Blood Lance instead of using Blood Surge. But I kind of like just going in here, getting in the mix, hitting some attacks, and, you know, basically becoming a supernova ball myself and basically doing damage. Now, the question I have for this build is going to be the sustainability over the end game, right? We know that things tend to hit a whole lot harder in the latter stages of the game, so it's going to be really interesting to see whether or not, you know, this build can survive. For the most of the stuff that was at this level, for level 25, I didn't have any problems with it. It worked fairly well for most of the bosses. I was able to survive. I didn't have any problems, so I wasn't complaining about it too much. But I do know that, like, you know, when we get into, you know, dimension rifts and things like that or whatever, this could become compromised. So we'll end up having to see. But like I said, you still have the ability to just go Blood Lance and still stay behind and let your minions do things while you basically boost your health, and you have a survivability method there. That's just me. The standing behind in the back right there while all my minions attack, just I didn't find a whole lot of fun in that playstyle. So just me. But I enjoyed this playstyle quite a bit. I'm really looking forward to the game when it comes out and seeing what the build can do. Probably more. You know, Necromancer is going to be one of the classes that I'll probably deeply invest in. I don't really know so much about any of the other classes like Barbarian and Sorcerer and Rogue. I am interested in the Druid, but, you know, for now with the update, I basically had time for this character, for the Necromancer, and I wanted to get as much detailed information as I could for you guys, so that way you guys know exactly what to expect when the game comes out for the character, depending on whether or not they make changes. They are, like they said, this is a true beta, this is not a marketing beta, so there could be some deep changes coming down in the end. But like I said, overall, really good class, character class in my opinion for the Necromancer. I like the way they did it overall. This is so weird playing with the screen inside here, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Until next time, peace.